Hey, this is Royce. I'm the Director of Business Development at Level 12.
Matthias Hager. I am a developer and project advocate here at Level 12.
And I'm Matt Llewellyn. I'm a team lead and senior developer here at Level 12.
Today we're going to be covering a project that we've recently done. We're still working on it, and we are going to be talking about how we've used Postgres and SQLServer and also good testing to deliver this project to our client. So Matt is the team lead on this project. So why don't you just dive in and tell us a little bit about what we're doing there, specifically, what are we trying to accomplish for the client in this project?
Sure. So the main idea of what we're trying to do here is test the way that we update our databases for the client's application. So you've got a client with a program that's running out on a server somewhere, and it's hooked up to a database that has all the information. And just as an example, let's say you want to add a new feature to track orders. You're going to need a new data table to have that order information. It's going to be there in your Postgres database or your SQLServer database. And you'll have some code in the program side with something like SQL Alchemy to track that information. Now, to make that work, when you go to actually put your new version of the application out on the server, you have to update that database with that new data table for the order information. And to do that, we use what we call migrations, data migrations. That takes you from the before state of the database onto the after state, where you have all your updated data tables. Sometimes you have to change some data around out of existing data that's in the database. And the data migration is what does that. So sometimes things get missed there. So you're trying to track orders. Let's say your migration forgot to add a quantity field, something like that. So it's in our codes data model. So all of our tests, our entire test suite for the code is actually passing. But the migration got it wrong. And so you go to production, people start trying to add orders on your website, and the app starts to crash and burn. You're like, the whole test suite passed. What happened? Well, the migration was wrong. The migration itself didn't get tested. So the problem that we're trying to solve is how to automatically test those migrations and make sure that they are correct. So you can test those migrations manually, and most developers will do that. And that's fine for the simple updates. That'll take care of most of your simple cases, which would probably cover our example with an orders table and having a quantity field. But the more complex the migration is, the more things will get missed. Say you've got information that wasn't required before in a table, but now it is required for any new records. Or say you've got some new constraints where two fields in the table really mesh together and have a requirement on both of them. So to write tests to automatically test these migrations, you really have to have a way in your test suite to load in the before state. So you have to keep track of where that was, and then move it up to the specific place where the migration is, and then run some specific tests on that to make sure the tables are laid out correctly, make sure any data that gets changed, that happens as expected, make sure all your edge cases are covered, because anytime you're dealing with existing data, you're going to have lots of edge cases. So you're going to end up with several tests, and then those move along with your test suite with the migration, get everything up to date, and then that will pass along with the rest of your test suite that covers your code. And when you go out to production with it, you know that the migration will run without error. You know that all of the I's are dotted, T's crossed, and you know that your application is going to work with the new version, with the orders that you're trying to track.
So to kind of summarize all that, at the highest level, the idea of what we're doing is we're testing to make sure, we're running automated tests to make sure that anytime there's a update or change, that nothing's getting broken or left behind.
That's right. You're making sure that the data model that's in your code and the data model that's actually in your database in Postgres or SQL Server, that stays in sync.
Okay. So then, for the business user, the real value, like, me being a not very technical person, is like, okay, like you said, I have a lot of stuff that I don't, fully understand, but, the business user that maybe isn't, the technologist per se, they just see a piece of software that's running really well. You don't have a lot of errors. You don't have a lot of downtime because it is tested really well to make sure that even before they really realize any errors have happened, we can get to them and fix them. Is that correct?
That's right. So your test suite will ensure that all the code's running right, but testing the migrations makes sure that you don't introduce other errors into the application.
Now, did this come up because of a specific problem that occurred, or is this something that the client asked for, or what was the sort of impetus for this development?
So the application that I am managing has around 200,000 lines of code, and a very, well, on the order of smaller clients, it's a pretty large database with a lot of records. And something that I found over the years is that the database got way out of sync with the code. And it didn't actually end up turning into a whole lot of errors, but there were some here and there. And at a certain point, we had to say, we got to clean up this entire mess and get the database back in sync with the model and use some automated tools that we have at our disposal to make sure that we don't get out of sync again. And testing the database migrations is the next step in that process.
Out of curiosity, was this something that the client said, hey, like, I need really well-tested databases with, running automatic tests, or is this just like, this is, maybe the client doesn't know that, but this is the way that you craft really well-running software?
It's the way you craft well-running software. The developers need to know what will give the client the highest odds at having a well-running application with very few errors. You don't want your users to try to go add information and then end up staring at an error screen where they have no idea what's wrong. They're pretty sure it's not their fault. And then they silently curse the developers. But
at that point, everybody's losing, right?
That's right. Everybody loses.
We're
the
losing because they're blaming us.
The developers lose. The client loses because they have software that they paid for that's not running the way it was intended to run.